In this video I'm going to work on a few workshop organisation projects. When I moved into the workshop I was working on nothing but workshop projects and I got a bit burnt out with it, to be honest. So then I started working on different projects, and that's why one of the wings of my mitre station now looks like this. All of these bits don't have a place to live yet and I really need to sort out this mess. First I want a new place for all of my drill bits to replace this one that I made out of MDF a while back. This was working okay up until I got some 7.5, 8.5, 9.5 and 12mm bits recently. So now I want to make something similar but bigger and with space for more bits in future as my collection grows. I had the idea of using some of this PVC conduit. We had some of this left over from some recent house renovations. If you want to make your own one of these, this stuff is inexpensive to buy, and I'll leave all of the details that you need in order to make this at a link in the comments section below. First I measured up the smallest and then the longest drill bits that I have so that I can figure out what length I wanted to use to cut the conduit. And then I use a fine tooth blade in the bandsaw to cut the PVC to consistent lengths by referencing the fence. You do need to be careful to use the correct blade for this. The more teeth the better in general, I think. And most metal cutting blades will work well for plastic too. Also be careful when cutting round things at the bandsaw just in general, because if the blade catches and spins the workpiece, it can really startle you, and being startled while using any power tool is something to be avoided. A safer option is just to use a hacksaw, and that works just as well, but it'll take a little longer. With all of the lengths cut, I can then start gluing them together using hot glue. I'm doing this on a flat surface because I want to keep it straight, and I'm also using a speed square as a straight edge to reference from. With that done, I marked up the height I wanted for the longest bits, followed by the height for the shortest bits at the other end, and then I can draw a line to join those points together. I then cut along that line at the bandsaw. For some of my thicker drill bits, I'm going to use some of this slightly larger 25mm conduit. And I followed exactly the same process of gluing together, marking and cutting. And I decided to hot glue the smaller one onto the bigger one to give me 2 tiers of storage. I can fill some of the voids with hot glue just to add more strength. And then to make sure that the bottom is flat, I do some sanding at the belt sander. This left some burrs, so I used a sharp blade to clean things up. Next I can find a piece of wood to use for the bottom, and I found this piece of rubber wood from an old dining table. I mixed up some epoxy to stick the conduit onto the wood, and then I can dab some onto the bottom and hold it in place for a minute or two while it cures. I can then start adding all of my bits, and even my extra long bits fit nicely in the longest section here. I can then screw this to the wall, and finally I wrote all of the sizes onto the front using a Sharpie pen. Next I want to make a place for my battery chargers. A while back, a friend and Patreon of the channel, Jack of All Trades, gave me this Bisley drawer unit, and I had the idea to put all of my chargers in it, but first I needed to make sure they all fit. And don't you just love it when things just work out perfectly? There's room in here for my 2 Hikoki chargers and my large double Makita charger, plus my Ryobi battery charger too. So after clearing up some of my random rubbish, I started to work on the back panel, first by marking the centre, because there's a metal divider here on the inside and I want to avoid drilling into that. With a hole started, I can then use a metal cutting blade in my oscillating tool to cut away more material, because I need to be able to fit the plugs for all of my chargers through here. I later realised that the plug for my Ryobi charger was much bigger, so I needed to make one of the holes a little bigger. This doesn't need to look pretty because it won't be seen round on the back, but I did take the time to file the sharp edges smooth just so that the cables don't snag on them. I also added some gaffer tape just to be on the safe side. The handles of these drawers are held on with some metal clips and I can remove them with a screwdriver. I can then lightly sand the drawer fronts with some fine 240 grit sandpaper because I want to paint them just because everything is better when it's green. I took the opportunity to oil the wheels on the drawer mechanism too. I also cleaned up the handles with some white spirit because they were a bit dirty. Once the paint was dry, I could secure the handles with these metal clips again. I could then put all of the chargers in and feed the power cables through the back panel. And I also cable tied the cables together to keep things neat. Now for the clever part, I'm going to plug all of these chargers into an extension lead, and then I'm going to plug that into a smart plug. I set up the smart plug on my phone, calling it the charging station, and now I have the option of turning it on and off via my phone or via voice control using the Google Home in my workshop. This will be really handy because if I leave the workshop at the end of the day with my batteries still charging, I can turn the socket off an hour or two later using my phone so that the batteries are fully charged next time I'm in the workshop. This worked out well. Now all of my chargers are in a dust-free environment. I was a little bit conscious that the chargers might overheat in here, so I've been keeping a close eye on it, and it seems okay. There are some holes in the top of the unit, so I think that helps with ventilation. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be an issue, but I'll keep an eye on it. The next task was to find a home for all of my rolls of tape. I dug out some small scraps of plywood and a dowel, and I cut the dowel in half at the miter saw, and these two pieces are going to hold the rolls of tape. I cut the plywood to the size I wanted at the table saw, and then I offered up the tape to the dowel to measure how far apart they needed to be to support the rolls of tape. And then I marked up that distance onto the plywood. I used an auger bit to drill the holes through both pieces of plywood, did a bit of sanding to clean up the plywood, and then I added some wood glue and fitted the dowels. I found another piece of plywood that I could use for a back panel. This was glued and screwed in place. And then I decided to add a curve to the front corners of the rack, which I cut out using a jigsaw. I applied some boiled linseed oil just to help keep it clean in future. And then I could screw it to the wall. This is MDF I'm screwing into here, so it'll hold just fine. Finally, I wanted to make a paper towel holder for these big rolls that I use. I want to store them vertically, and I'll explain why later. I had some scraps of oak veneered MDF to use up, and first I marked up a base and two triangular side panels, which I then cut out of the bandsaw. I mark up a centre point onto the base using a straight edge position from corner to corner, and then went and found a piece of dowel I could use, and this one measured 27mm or thereabouts. I didn't have a drill bit that size, so I drilled a 25mm hole, and then I removed a bit of material at the bottom of the dowel at the belt sander. I didn't seem to get any footage of that, so here's a reconstruction. Yes, the joinery here is a bit crude, but this is only a workshop project, so I wasn't bothered. I then add glue and drill a pilot hole through from underneath into the dowel so I can secure it with a screw. Next I can glue on my side panels, and I use brad nails to secure them until the glue dries. I wipe away excess glue with a damp cloth, and then using the last piece of MDF I have just enough to make a back panel. I did some sanding just to clean things up, and then I added some boiled linseed oil. A couple of brad nails holds this in position onto the wall temporarily, and then I can drive in a couple of screws. So what I like about this design is that when I have messy hands, I can take a bit of the paper towel off the roll just using one hand, as you can see here. I think that the key to being organised in the workshop is just as simple as having a dedicated home for absolutely everything. That way, cleaning is much quicker and easier because you know exactly where everything needs to go, and also you know exactly where to find things when you need them. These 4 simple projects is just the beginning really. There is loads more stuff I need to sort out. I've had a lot of people asking me about doing a workshop tour, and I will do one once I feel that everything is as organised as it should be. That might take a few weeks, months or years, who knows. Things will probably just keep evolving, but I'd rather show you guys something at a point where I'm proud of it rather than something that feels a bit half finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe for more weekly woodworking videos. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, you can find a link to that in the description box below, where you can get early access to my videos, some exclusive content, free plans and project cut lists, and a named credit at the end of my videos. Thank you for watching.